everyone? Joe here from ActionX. Welcome to What's in Two, but welcome back. If this is your final Suits LA episode review, that's it. We've reached the series finale. This is the last episode. There won't be season 2, no episode 14, nada. This is the end of the road, and I'm gonna be completely frank with you. I'm gonna be completely honest with you. I feel like this was an episode. It had its moments of like usual Suits LA, like, yeah, I'm not really vibing with it, but I do believe this was a good episode to end up the run. I feel like this was like kind of like a sample platter of like, hey, this is what season 2 could have been. That's kind of like my analogy into it. Like everything that I kind of wanted from Suits LA kind of was like materializing here. Like, you know, some of the core aspects that we were kind of getting in the middle of the season. Well, now the middle of the show now kind of coascends to where we were in the finale. And I'm like, that's kind of where I'm really intrigued by. And I'm a little bit now lightly bummed we're not going to get a season 2 to really kind of, you know, really nail that deep into it. And I feel like it would have made for a even more stronger premise had even this gotten a back 9 where like, I feel like it would have been a very interesting approach to like, you know, obviously it wasn't going to happen because we're super late into the game. But no, like, you know, honestly, I think for me personally, this episode had at least a potential good starter point for where season 2 could have picked up. Not in terms of like a story, but in terms of like where the characters were, where the energy was. You know, we were probably going to get some sort of, obviously, a serialized nature to it. Obviously, it's impeccable. But it really felt like they were finally listening to my complaints. And they were ratifying those. And we were going to get to some fun parts, you know. Not to say the flashback stuff, for example, like, you know, were mediocre a bit. They were kind of like, you know, obviously kind of garnishing the backstory, kind of like, you know, really filling in the plot line. But, you know, honestly, you know, the way things ended, even with the flashback storyline to now, like, there was just so much goodwill to really get down into it, to really kind of, you know, get into where this show could have potentially been. And I to Aaron Krosh, who is the series creator of the original Suits to now LA, this should have been your premiere. Not your premiere. This should have been one of your opening episode. The vibe. I understand where you're coming from a serialized storytelling perspective. You want to kind of, you know, put these characters in very opposing places because, you know, people like drama, so to speak. But for me, as like the vibe that you were giving me in the marketing material, like, that was kind of not what I was expecting. Well, we're kind of like, you know, luring, because again, we're not doing a season 2 predictions video anymore. We were planning on doing that next week, but since the show's canceled, it makes no sense to do so. It's kind of, you know, ill will to talk about, you know, fallen speculated comments. But honestly, other than that, I very much feel like this was a good episode to end off the show. It kind of sucks because, again, it gives you a little taste of what could have been, what should have been, and where in reality, where do we go next with that? But with all that being said, let's go for the Butcher recap for the last time for Suits LA and talk about the series finale. So we pick up, I believe, I'm trying to remember what do we get. We have what, a flashback perspective? No, we do not. I believe it's just the more banter. Yeah, I remember now. It's more banter. Ted starting off his day, he immediately summons Erica to have a kind of a morning meeting. Apparently, we're not quite done with the Dylan stuff yet for her movie deal. Now that she's officially on board to play the lead for the film of her dreams, obviously, financially, she needs some monies. She needs a pretty decent chunk of the back-end profit, and obviously, that's a very certain percentage that's usually saved for the director and for the producer. Obviously, the people that are really putting in their, you know, valuable time into a project where, you know, again, like, you know, there was the flip side of her wanting to just have I'm finally get to do my dream role, but at the same time, like, I'm going to get money off this. You know, if this is my dream role, this is my dream project, I deserve, and we can go into like that back and forth of things, kind of, you know, relating to the 2023 SAG-AFTRA strike and everything. But, the reason is again, so the Black firm, Black and Associates, has the director on retainer as a client, and obviously Rick has Dylan as a client. So it makes sense right now with everything going on with Ted that Erica is going to be the one to spearhead it, work with Rick to kind of garnish the best deal possible, obviously for their director as well as Rick for Dylan, since they're still trying to be somewhat buddy nowadays. Obviously, Erica's a little bit slightly annoyed because of the fact this is not kind of what she was expecting, but at the end of the day, this is something that Ted really needs to happen again to kind of continue to kind of merge the two bridges to head into a nice peaceful unity, so to speak. Which Erica decides to abide by. We then also cut back over to the other side of the street where Rick is about to begin his day, and Dylan's already there waiting for him. Obviously, she's expecting the fact that, okay, well, we had a very passionate kiss last night. You rebuffed me, so I'm here just to kind of, obviously not only just for the business perspective, just like her being like, okay, so I'm assuming you're going to ghost me after this personally, so I'm just coming to terms with that. And Rick explains to her, like, the reason why that they can't be together is because it's, you don't miss business with personal. Obviously, Rick was her lawyer first. He is her attorney, her representation. He cannot also be the boyfriend because it becomes very, you don't know where the lines begin and end between you're the lawyer and then you're the boyfriend. There's no real end. There's no really beginning to ending to that. So he's saying, but for the benefit of the business, because again, obviously there's obviously bigger things than them right now, that he should just continue to be her representation and they should forget about the kiss and move on. Obviously Dylan has other ideas, which we'll get to that momentarily. Then I want to say we get over to, I'm just going to do a brief dash on certain storyline. Stewart is back at work, but we don't really get to see much more of that, which I'm a little concerned about because I remember I saw a behind the scenes video post of Louis Litt's character, Louis Litt's actor, with the cast at the final table read, because it was clear that certain people were not there at the final. So whether or not they cut his scene in the finale or not, I don't know. Whether or not they just did 2 in 1, it would have been really awkward for him to just be there at the series finale read, just like thinking to myself, like, yeah, I'm not in this episode, but I kind of want to hear the energy. It's kind of weird. Stewart calls up Kevin, present day wise, to let him know that he has a bit of a job for him to do while he's in New York, and that Kevin's the man for the job, that he could probably get it done, and he wants to keep it under wraps, just to surprise Ted when the time is right. And Kevin's like, okay, I'll do it, fine. So, from there, Ted returns to his office where he is called in by Samantha, who is requesting his assistance on the matter. She's about to fly into a potential lawsuit with another asshole producer who's a little bit more on the more, I guess the last producer we dealt was kind of like murderer adjacent. This one is more like abuser adjacent. If that's the terminology to word here. And Ted's obviously wondering why does he need to get involved, considering the fact that these are 2 different firms, this is 2 different matters. Why would he need to get involved? And when she mentions the name of him, which I don't really remember, to be honest with you, that's when Ted kind of gets a little bit re-triggered a little bit and looks at his fellow assistant associate, the one who always kind of reprimands him and everything. I forgot her name, to be honest with you. I really did. It's been 13 episodes. I never got to learn her name. I do apologize. I really, really do. I tried. I really, really tried, but I did my best. Leia in her only scene for the role was about to do a whole red ribbon opening ceremony for her own office, and Erica's like, nah, we ain't doing this. But anyway, Leia switches to business mode, giving Erica all the paperwork she needs to kind of go and argue for the director's portion for the back end, and see what workable way they can give to allow Dylan to still have something along the nature of a fair deal. But and again, this was Leia's only scene in the episode that kind of ends her run on Suits LA, which I'm like kind of underwhelming, but okay, it is what it is. We have our first flashback scene where, again, this is the dinner where Ted and Eddie's dad wants to take them out before he goes out to prison. However, once he arrives at the apartment, he greets them both. He does let Ted know, hey, look, something came up. It's pretty serious. I would rather you and me get dinner tonight, and I'll get breakfast with Eddie tomorrow, which obviously Ted gets insulted by, because in fact, A, he doesn't want to eat with his dad alone, and B, this was not the plan. And he's like, I swear to God, when we have our conversation, you will understand why I cannot have Eddie there at the dinner. And he's like, fine. Eddie even interjects, like, I don't mind. I'll just stay home, eat pizza, That's about it. And watch TV. And Ted's like, all right, but if you eat in my suit again, I swear to God. And Eddie chuckles. I love Eddie so much. I really, really do. We cut back to present day where I believe, yeah, I think Ted hops over the pond. He meets up with Samantha. Sadly, I don't think he asks. No, he does ask his assistant associate about him, and she's like automatically no. I tried before. It failed. I'm not doing it again. I'm in a good position in my life. I'm in a good position in my career. I don't need to kind of, go backwards to kind of deal with that man again. And Ted's like, I understand, but again, could be an opportunity to get payback on everything he's done before. So, you can be a very key vocal witness that could be crucial to the case, which she denies. She doesn't want to do it. So that's when Ted hops over the pond, letting Samantha know he has managed to garnish up some witnesses for the case. Same with Samantha. So with Samantha. So hopefully their 9 or 10 witnesses will be enough to take it further. However, sadly, he does come in the door, and I swear to God, he looks so familiar. And then I remember, oh my God, he is the freaking guy from Heels, the dystopia wrestler manager, the one that's Stephen Amell's character. I already forgot about his character's name on the show. His entire run, Jack Spade. Yeah, Jack Spade, I remember now. His entire run there was just fighting this guy, and I'm just like, he's back. He's missing a portion of his beard, but I'm like, this is exactly the thing I love. Where like, okay, it's a deep cut for me because I watch Heels, so I know Steven probably had a great relationship with with all of the actors on the show, and the fact that we finally got the first real like post Arrow Heels, like. It always is cool, and obviously, people can say like, oh, well, like, no, that's just friends, like, giving each other work. I mean, but yeah, but it's cool to like, have like these mini reunions where, like, once again, Stephen Amell's character's up against him, and I'm just like, he's still an asshole. He knows how to play an asshole really, really well, and I find that to be very amusing for me. But as he comes in and essentially tells them, yeah, he already found out who the witnesses were. He already took care of them. They will not be presenting at court. But Samantha and Ted are still going to be adamant by still pursuing charges against him, regardless if they have the witnesses, considering the fact it's just the longevity and the size of the complaints alone should be enough to at least warrant the lawsuit to begin. But the guy's not really worried about it. He really isn't. I believe Erica's going to do some recon on something, and then she runs into Dylan, and Dylan wants to switch over to Erica to be her representative finally, which Erica's like, okay, you asked me before, then you switched to Rick, so I'm like, what's all with this back and forth? And Dylan's like, yeah, well, I don't feel 100% comfortable with Rick's representation. I don't. And I think, I know you've had a really big hand in my current, guarantees for this movie that, maybe it's time I switch over to you. Finally really get to see what is, really your style representation. Erica's like, okay, well, let's figure out this back end stuff first, and after that, if you then still feel comfortable with having me as your representation, then we can proceed forward with that conversation. But for right now, stay with Rick and work it as may be. So I believe from there, yeah, Erica goes straight upstairs to speak to Rick to begin the negotiation process. And Dylan's also there too, which again confuses Erica since it should usually be a lawyer-to-lawyer thing. Talent should not usually be involved till after either they reach a crucial impasse that requires the update or approval or the actual signing of it. So her being there is a bit confusing. But Rick's like, well, she wants to be there to watch me work. So who am I to deny my client that? And Erica's like, okay, I see. They pursue forward, and obviously, Erica's, fighting for her client, saying that there's no way we're going to give even a cent of the back end compensation just for Dylan, who's going to spend only a few months on the movie, and then she's going to go right back into a new project or stuff like that. And while the director's going to be in the editing room for months and months, even years. And I think that's something that people don't understand is that the reason why directors don't do more is because they're the captain of these ships. Once certain people kind of, finish their role in the production, they move on to the next thing. They move on to the next gig. I distinctly remember I had watched this Indiegogo campaign many, many moons ago from someone I respected from one of my inspirations for making YouTube content. And he said it quite frankly, like, yeah, they only filmed a project for like 3 days, and even though like there was been no updates, like well, first of all, people can't stay on board on a project. Obviously that was just a presentation pitch. It wasn't meant to be anything more than that. It wasn't even an episode of a show. It was just a pitch. So no one's gonna like stay around for like years and years and years waiting for the job to begin. Because the job may never come. It just was a experiment. You never know. That's when all great TV shows start. Every great movie starts with a pitch, a presentation. Sometimes it goes someplace. Most times it doesn't. You kind of just gotta test your waters and try. But and that's what Erica's point is, to the point where like Dylan will work on the movie for 3 months, and then after that she's done. So she'll move on to the next director. She'll move on to the next project. Why should she get back in conversation? Like, she's not a Tom Cruise, who's like obviously so influential in the producing process that like, and obviously putting his life on the line in that case to warrant it. So I'm like, for me, if I was allowed, I would even offer a cent of the percentage. But again, considering that Rick and Erica got to work together, both of their clients are involved in this, and they got to work together for at least a few months, that they have no choice but to find a way to get Dylan that back in compensation. Even the two of them teaming up, going back to the Universal lot, going back to the producer that both Rick and then at the time Ted basically kind of put the fear in, like, yeah, you're going to give Dylan the opportunity to be in this movie. At least give her the audition and everything. So now them coming back and just trying to get the back end compensation, like getting her to cut her own back end compensation. She's like, hell no. Like, I worked my ass off to get the rights to that book. There ain't no way I am also sacrificing anything from that sort. But I believe Erica and Rick, if I remember correctly, eventually put a little bit of pressure on her, saying that, hey, look, that's showbiz. Sometimes you got to spend money or sacrifice money to make even bigger money. So that's just the name of the game on that one. So I believe from there we go back to the next flashback where Ted and his father again are having their dinner, and it's very awkward because Ted doesn't want to be there really without Eddie, and that's just like, oh come on, like, well, why are we doing this? This could be one of our last dinners in a long time. I'm like, okay, 3 years is not that bad, but still, yeah. That's not really down for. He really isn't. Obviously, I'm like, he really should be focusing on Eddie, which again, him omitting Eddie here is not the properness, and all he wants to do is like, how do I redeem myself? All I want to do is, I don't want to come out of prison and be 100% alone. I want to have my family there. I want to have my sons there, and I'm willing to do the work, even from behind bars, to get back to a point where we can be a family again. And Ted's like, well, if you, for starters, start calling out Eddie at least once a week. See how he's doing, catch up on his life, really get to know your son. And then maybe from there, if Ted sees there's a genuine effort from him for Eddie, then Ted will go ahead and proceed with going to have a second chance with his father. And it's like, okay, then they can take it from there. I believe we cut back over to the original case where they go to court. Ted and Samantha are like, back together. Not like that, but like, back together, fighting in the same camp against them. And they're trying to do what they can with the limited resources they have. But it's not quite enough. It is enough to kind of, push a little bit further for exploration, but it's not really enough to really like warrant a real case right now. So it's kind of is a little bit of a defeating blow to them. Ted even going back to her to try and get like that, that push to try and like, really, get that buy-in. And she's a little insulted because like, I gave you the lead at least on people that I work with that could potentially be willing to go on the stand and argue against him. But, she, again, does not want to, considering the fact that she has a very traumatic experience where, like, she nearly got sexually assaulted by him before she ended up quitting and leaving him. That, like, she doesn't want to re-explore that. And the last time she asked someone for assistance, that it didn't work. It set everyone back, and, that they just, what's the chance of trying again? And, Ted's obviously reminding her, like, look, we will do something. We will try again. We will make sure he pays for what he's done. But Ted knows that between him and Samantha and with their current state, it's not enough. And he knows who to call to really find a way to stick it to him to make sure that, they get that victory. So Ted reaches out to Amanda first to get permission from her, or at least her awareness that Ted's going to go after her rival to get the job done. Because, again, Amanda and him are, like, very limited in communication right now. It's not something that, that Ted needs right now. He needs someone to play a little dirty to make sure this guy really pays for his crimes. And obviously, Amanda immediately gets mad at him because why you already know that all she cares about is the win. She does not care about what's right and wrong. I do. And Ted's just reminding her, look, we have hundreds and hundreds, well, not like that much, but a lot of complaints against him. And, that they should be warned enough to at least indicate that this man does not deserve to still be in his position of power. And, again, Amanda understanding that she still has to understand there's a law, there's due process. Okay, I'm sorry he did those horrendous things, but at the end of the day, he is still eligible to be, what's the word? To be able to still have his own say. He's innocent until proven guilty, and but Ted knows for a fact that's not going to happen. So he was just letting her know this was going to happen, and she's going to have to accept it. So from there, I believe we're continuing with the flashbacks where Ted and his dad are actually kind of getting along a little bit. They kind of, are letting down their guards a little bit, kind of really getting to really have some father-son quality bonding time. And that's when Kevin calls over Ted. He lets him know, hey, look, you gotta get at your apartment right now. It's an emergency. And Ted's like, oh, what's going on? And it's like, well, Eddie's at the apartment right now. I'm not there. And Kevin's like, oh, shit, no, you gotta get Eddie out of there right now. It's serious. I believe they put a hit on you. And, and I think they're gonna attack your apartment tonight. So Ted immediately leaves the restaurant, starts running there, good old-fashioned running scene. Stephen Amell. It's not a Stephen Amell-led show without there being a running scene. It's like the Tom Cruise movie. Tom Cruise needs to have some sort of running moment. Stephen Amell needs to have a running moment on every one of his TV shows. It's just a natural fit. So Kevin's on the way. Ted's running there. The man's and Eddie's just eating pizza in Ted's suit, enjoying himself, not a care in the world, just watching his favorite TV show. Ted and Kevin manages to meet up at the very much at the same time. They're about to head in there, but sadly, the bomb goes off and it kills Eddie. And I will say, I was hoping for a much more emotional response from Ted. I'm not gonna lie to you. I was expecting some tears, some waterworks. That was just my 2 cents on it. Whether or not people get, oh, it's hard to cry or everything. Right? He did the role just right. He was in complete shock. I totally understand that, but considering the fact this is someone he genuinely loves and cares for, that I mean, if it was me, I would immediately be bawling my eyes out. And again, I know Ted is not the same character. He's not like every other person. Everyone takes to shocking events differently. Some are delayed crying, some are just audible gasping, audible shock, And I do understand. I don't know. For me, I always had this expectation that Ted was going to finally break down and be emotional. That's kind of was my expectation going into this moment. And it does suck. This is the way he went out. He really did. He doesn't deserve this. So I believe from there we head back over to. I'm trying to remember where we go from here. I kind of blanked out for a second. I want to say eventually Rick does get some updates on the deal, and Dylan comes back, and assumingly, when Rick kind of maybe confused his words when he told Dylan that, oh, we might have gotten into the deal when maybe she thought that, oh, it was ready to sign. It's not, and Dylan's just there look, I'm just letting you know once this is all over that I'm going to switch services to Erica because I believe there's something here between us, and I'm willing to give up the potential, a great representation for potentially having an even better boyfriend. And she's willing to kind of take that risk, take that leap, and that's when Rick has to tell the truth. Look, it's not you, really. It's because I'm in love with someone else, and even though that person, as far as he knows, doesn't love him the same way as he does, that he can't get over her. It can't be fair to Dylan if Rick's always going to have feelings for someone else out there, which I'm pretty sure Dylan does not take lightly, but at least Rick tells him the truth. It's it's a notable thing, to be honest with you. Then Ted goes over to the same lawyer that Amanda hates office. She immediately tries to dismiss him, but Ted tries to explain to her, look, this is a very important case. I got a big witness willing to come forward. we have a strong case here. We just need you to really kind of find the way to like really put the needle on him to make sure we get a full victory over this. She's still denying it, but eventually she comes around and she's like, okay, fine, we'll do this. Ted and Samantha organize a re-meet up with that producer, thinking that he won and he's ready to like kind of like let this all be bygones. But once Ted whips out his associate assistant as well as the other lawyer, that between all the four of them and you just pressuring him that it's enough to at least like get look. We could decide to destroy your career by tomorrow, or you sign off on just admitting guilty to one count of sexual assault. And that's it. We will never publish against you. We will never move against you again. Just, sign your defeat and we'll move on from there. And he decides to do so. He does. And they do let him know because he signed this paperwork that they do have to voluntarily admit him to the LA's registry of sexual offenders. And obviously he gets mad about that. But he's like, who you want to sue for something that's already factual? Like, go for it. But, you're not going to like the outcome for that. And obviously he has to walk away defeated because, like, again, he's kind of been made there. So, which I consider a win for everyone, for all the associates over there. So I believe from there, where do we go from here next? We return back to the flashbacks. It's after the funeral. Ted gets a call from Kevin, who Ted is mad at him for missing the funeral. He's about to rip into him, but Kevin admits that due to his anger, he went after one of the lieutenants, and he did manage to kind of figure out that it was him that organized the hit, that he was the one who actually killed Eddie. The police pulled him away before he could do anything, and also he doesn't have any real evidence to prove otherwise. So sadly, Kevin lost his job over that. Because of that. And while Ted kind of understands it, he's also kind of still pissed because Kevin wasn't there for him on that very important day. He returns back to his apartment, or at least the remains of it. His dad is outside also, who did not attend the funeral. Ted gets immediately mad for him, like, you say you care about it, you said you care, but you can't even show up for your own son's funeral. Like, how do I read into that? How do I really kind of, accept that, really? And he admits, yes, I know, I just couldn't face it, I couldn't go up to it. And that's when Ted notices that, like, wait a minute. You hugged Eddie last night. You never hugged Eddie before in your life. And you last minute told me that Eddie can't participate in the meet. So what was going on? And that's when he admits that he was aware there was going to be a hit, that because of everything that happened, at least one of them was going to die. It was going to happen, whether it was that night or another night. That was the plan. The hits would have kept on coming. And he chose Ted over Eddie. Like, in the grand scheme for him in his brain, that Ted was going to have the much more successful career than Eddie was. And maybe a part of him admits that if Ted dies and Eddie's still alive, then he would have to take care of him, or Eddie would be on the streets. Like, I'm pretty sure that wouldn't be the case. I'm pretty sure Samantha would have flown him out to LA and kind of, made her live with her, like, which would have been a satisfying continuation. But regardless, Ted obviously gets supremely mad at him for, like, doing so. Like, essentially, he chose one son over the other. And he still kind of goes back at him saying, hey, I made the right choice. I will live with that. And I will not hesitate to do it again. And obviously Ted's completely mad at him, and, we leave it as may be. And then I believe this is around the same... No, we're not done. We get to the next flashback scene where, Kevin's out of the bureau. He gets the offer from his dad to kind of join his detective agency, and he wants to offer Ted a job to work together again. And obviously Ted's like, I'm not a detective. Like, this is a private law firm, a private detective firm. Like, this has nothing to do with my legal my profession. And he's like, I know, but we work together very well. That maybe we can continue that partnership in a different regard. And Ted declines, and also Kevin also is using this as a way to kind of ease his consciousness about everything that apparently he found out there was a potential hit on them earlier. That he found out, but it was never honestly 100% concrete for them to make a move. So the fact that he kept that information to himself until the night of, that maybe he could have done something to kind of prevent that from happening. But Ted doesn't say anything to him. He's just like, I don't have the mental capacity to tell you it wasn't your fault. I don't. So Ted leaves, and at least from what we know, that was the last time he was in New York, or that we're aware of. Then we cut to present day, where the contract's completed for between Kevin and Stewart. Kevin gives it to Stewart pro bono, pro bono, pro bono, yeah. So all's good there because it was for a very legitimate reason. So when Ted gets the letter from Kevin, apparently they use the money that Stewart gained and the estate to fund buying out a local park that used to be Ted and Eddie's playground and naming it the Eddie Black Park in honor of his memory, which is very, very sweet. And Kevin, did all the paperwork, he did all the effort to make that happen, and Stewart backed the whole thing, and now a part of Eddie will always live forever, even if he's no longer here. And this is also the time where Ted apologizes to Kevin for not apologizing to him sooner. That it was never Kevin's fault. That Ted also knew that there was a part of him that things could have been different had Ted reached out to Eddie before he died. Giving him that call that he promised before. It got too late, and he also had his own regrets, and that he kind of took it out on the people around him, and kind of making their own regrets kind of feel much more bigger, and feeling like Ted didn't do anything wrong as a result. And that's when also Kevin decides to reverse his course and wants to accept the offer from Ted to move out to LA and join the Black Associates team as their in-house detective. And Ted says 100% yes, the offer's still on the table. So at least in this regard, Kevin would have head off to LA to kind of kickstart his new chapter as well. Then, if I remember correctly, yeah. So Erica also gets another update from Dylan. She will not be pursuing with the representation change again, and that she will remain with Rick at this time. And obviously, Erica gets mad at Rick because how many times I got to play this back and forth? Because it seems like by this point you're kind of playing me around like a shoestring and kind of damaging my character, damaging my worth ethic for whatever sick game you have. And obviously, Rick says, and it's not like that. And that's when Rick tells her the truth. Like the reason why Dylan was even considering the representation change, because she thought that this was a possibility for them to date, and that wasn't the plan because Rick was still in love with Erica, that he could not get her out of her mind, he could not really move past her. And Erica, hearing all that, the two kiss finally. They're in the middle, they're about to start boating, and we cut away from the cameras there as we return back to Ted for his last series of scenes where Ted meets up with Amanda again, kind of the two of them talk about despite Amanda's, not giving the approval to do for what Ted did, she still understood for the grand scheme of things it was the right choice, it was the correct choice, and she's not gonna have it against him. And Ted's only letting her know this as a professional courtesy because he does still see her as a partner, and they need to work together. And that's when Amanda's decides what, I did some more thinking on this whole let's not do anything together that's not work related. It just doesn't seem like it's fair for the work environment. But Amanda's willing to start to kind of, give that a try, and willing to go out with drinks with Ted and seeing whether or not I can take them. And Ted sadly has to recline because he has his own plans. But he will, he did offer her to can we reschedule for tomorrow? And she's like, better find me if you want to. Again, the more playful teasing on that one. Ted heads over across the pond to meet up with Stewart for their last scene together, where Ted graciously thanks Stewart for the sentiment. This was very nice. This was very sweet. And with everything that just happened between them in the last few weeks, Stewart wants to change course. He wants to go ahead with a proper merger between the original two firms as planned. And then he wants to start talking about naming. Is it going to be Lane Black and Railman, or what's the result? Ted doesn't give an answer to him just yet. He's still got a couple more things to think about before he takes that on. And when he heads downstairs, he runs into Samantha, who also approved that to finally go ahead with the merger properly. And Ted's like, you also told me in private that you were regaining feelings for me, and so is this something you really want to work together again and have those existing feelings? She's like, yeah, they already did it once, it was kind of messy, and she's kind of willing to do it again. And Ted's like, okay, let's go for it, let's pursue the merger and see what comes in May. And then the last shot of the series is Ted cockily walking out the building, knowing in his heart that things have kind of gone back on his way. He has a good team. He has a good partnership. He's going to get his original partner back. Maybe a new partner himself, romantically. He's living top of his game, and that's it. That's the end of the show. That was an end on Suits LA. So I think for me, yeah, I want to say most likely they probably wrote it as like kind of like that very loose, ambiguous opening. Where for me, I'm perfectly satisfied. If this was the final episode of the show, it does what it needs to do. Obviously, maybe down the road, maybe Aaron will do a proper Suits revival or another spinoff and pick up with these characters again. Like I'd be down for it. But honestly, no, I think the show ended well for what they did. Um, it did set the light seeds for season 2, but at the same time, it kind of wrapped things up where like everything you kind of need to know for the story has been completed. It's all done, and now we're moving forward to whatever is next. For these people's lives. I think between I would have loved to get more Ted and Stewart. Obviously, did them like kind of playing around with it, and again them teasing the fact that hey, if the merger goes through again, then we can start working together again. We can start really being a team together again. Like all of this really kind of points out to me that like there was the potential for a real future for them, and that was something that I as a viewer was still very much hoping for between them, and that. But they did dealing with the guest star of the week with their the case of the week, essentially that what could have been, what should have been, them tying it into one of their existing characters, kind of giving her a little bit more layers, a little bit more of her own story to delve out, because I don't think she was really developed too much. She had her own character, her own personality, but not really much of her own backstory. So giving that an opportunity, it really was like, this is what I want to see more of going forward. That was kind of my hope for the matter of things. And then with everyone else, even getting a little bit of Kevin, the flashback stuff, kind of, going full circle, getting what we were promised with Eddie's death and everything. For honestly, I think for what the matter may be, like, the show had its problems. We'll talk more about that next week when we do our definitive review for the whole show. But essentially, this episode kind of gave me a little hope, a little optimistic that, they had heard what people didn't like from the pilot, from those first round of episodes. And, whether it was planned or not, this was meant to kind of, kickstart what could have been for the show. And, it really does suck as a result. It does, but that's just showbiz by a certain point. And we move on to May. So, with that all being said, I'm giving this episode 1.5 thumbs up. Let me know down below what you think of the series finale of Suits LA. Did you love it? Did you like it? Did you thought it was there? Let me know down below. We'd love to have a conversation with you about it. But that's going to do for me today, everyone. So for otherwise, this has been What's New from ActionX, reviewing the final episode of Suits LA in this very short series run. If you only care about Suits LA, we will be back next week, again, like I said before, with our definitive series review on the whole show, all 13 episodes, spoiler-filled. We're going to talk about the entirety of it. What did I like about it? What did I didn't like about it? We're going to go all into details about it next week. If you do care about stuff beyond Suits LA, we do have our rookie reviews coming out each and every week after Tuesdays, after new episodes on ABC. But again, if this is the end for the road for you, if you will not be joining us next week for the full thoughts in Season 1 / the series, thank you for watching these last 13 weeks. This has been fun, I'm a little bit more inclined to get into the Suits universe. Maybe, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Maybe down the road soon. Who knows? But this was, great to see Steven again. Great to, see Josh McDermott in a new role. Seeing all these new actors, new faces to me. And, just having some fun. And, it was just a fun 13 weeks just talking about it, whether or not the content itself was great or not, it was still a fun 13 weeks, and I very much enjoyed it. Hopefully it enticed you to stick around for our larger pieces of content, we always do episode reviews for other shows, so hopefully my voice alone was enough to kind of get you in another content, so hopefully I'll see you down the road. But if that's not the case, thank you so much for watching again. Please subscribe if you haven't yet. Like, favorite, share if you want to. Ring that bell and follow social media for more. But until we see each other again, thank you so much again. Please stay safe out there. Be good to each other as always. Peace out.